know what you're doing, but they're actually working together in a massive assault on black and brown people across the country.
So part of it is that Reagan begins to tighten the borders, especially the southeast border, to prevent cocaine from coming into the United States, but ironically, more cocaine actually comes in during his tenure than before. I mean, so part of it is these policies, and the book kind of asks us to question, why have we continued to embrace these sets of punitive policies, even though they have failed? I think especially now, and I wish that the Trump administration would consider this instead of continuing these policies that we know fail, and that many police chiefs around the country know have failed and don't work to control crime. We really need to think, okay, so the hard-nosed, militarized police and the zero tolerance policies haven't worked. So let's try a more preventative approach that really places social welfare and socioeconomic reform or transformation at the center of our approach to urban policy.
You're listening to The Michael Slate Show, and we're talking today with Elizabeth Hinton. Elizabeth is the author of From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime, The Making of Mass Incarceration in America. Let me ask you this, because there's a couple of things that I want people to understand what this has meant in real life for people. It's really important because, you look at the prison statistics and you don't understand I thought one of the things that was really helpful in your book is that when you get through the book, when you're going through the book, there's points where you present exactly what's the prison population today? Who makes it up? How did they get there? All of these kinds of things. Because here's the thing. Nothing has been sitting still since the days of Reagan. When Reagan was in, this stuff began. It's continued all the way through. It's continued through every administration you have, and it's reached its apex right now in Trump. And there's a whole way that this goes, and it falls out, like, for instance, in schools. The schools that were, if you live somewhere in, like, Wonderland, you're sort of, you're thinking about, well, schools, you get up, and you might not like your teacher, but you go to school and do whatever, But when you're talking about the people that were living under the gun and the many guns and under the, just the raining down of drugs and all these other things and the mass incarceration, all of this, when you're living under there, schools actually come to mean something else. And when you're actually talking about the way that people have been treated and what was given rise to through, as we were talking about earlier, about the cops and the role that they play in actually helping to bring in, it's funny that you mentioned cocaine, because I was in Miami during the last rebellion I had in '89, and one of the things that happened while I was there was that these police had all, they showed up one night, and on the river there was this boat, and these cops pulled up to the boat, and they got out, and they had all these homeless guys that they got, and they put them there, and they unloaded a bunch of packages, and they spent the entire night doing it, and then all these guys were killed. And I can't remember exactly how they found out it was the cops that did it, but the cops had just taken all of this coke and they disappeared with it. And when they were caught and they were put on trial, and they knew they were going to get convicted, so they kind of all disappeared. They all happened to have, they had posted bail and they walked away. So you're looking at all this stuff, and I was thinking about the schools and what happens in these schools. And Crenshaw High School, there was a very moving piece you did around Crenshaw High School in terms of what was actually going on there and what had been unleashed there. And kids are not kids anymore when they are kids, but they're living a life of terror in a lot of ways. And that was all hooked up with the flowering of this whole insane, drug-fueled, and actually even more important than drug-fueled, a really insidious and killing, basically acting towards black people. Mm-hmm. This is sort of the way it goes now. It's not a question of black people have a right to live. It's a lot of, in this administration that's here now, it's who says they have a right to live. Mm-hmm. They cause more trouble than anything else. And so you're looking at these schools in a situation that was in the aftermath of Reagan, or during Reagan, but then aftermath under Bush and all this other stuff. And what was going on is that more and more you got these schools where people couldn't go to school. One of the places you write about is Crenshaw High School. Mm-hmm. It was really moving to read that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is as early as the 1970s, and again, it's based on this assumption about blackness and criminality, and as you mentioned, the devaluing and the lack of care, the benign neglect in Daniel Patterson. Moynihan's words of towards black people on the part of policymakers in black life, where schools like Crenshaw and housing projects become fortified in new ways, that you begin to get the gates, and you begin to get actually a security industry that's focused on how to better surveil certain schools in targeted communities, and you get housing projects that are being fortified in new ways too. And this is in the 70s. This is before kind of the height of when we think about crime and drugs and social harm in low-income communities of color. And it goes into
(202-123), they would get a surprise visit. The feeling of prison for a lot of people in these neighborhoods, and you didn't see them on, out in Pacific Heights or something, or Pacific Palisades. You didn't see it out there. You saw it in Pico Union, you saw it in Watts, you saw it other places. It was a concentration of everything we've been talking about in a certain sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and the kind of, I mean, that is a very overt manifestation of the ways in which entire communities get criminalized and can't go about their daily noon. And helicopters aren't as common as they were in Operation Cul-de-sac days, but it's just, that would never happen in Beverly Hills. And it's something that we all just kind of deal with and get used to. But then what is the long-term impact of that, especially in a community where so many residents are incarcerated upstate?
So why don't you tell us what Operation Cul-de-sac is?
So Operation Cul-de-sac was a program of the Los Angeles Police Department that was initiated in the early 90s, and essentially police, and this is kind of after the major gang sweeps that happened in the late 80s, early 90s, where basically thousands of black men were processed in mobile command units through the criminal justice system because they were potentially or suspected gang members. And so following that operation, which got a lot of criticism, the LAPD set up Operation Cul-de-sac, which essentially established gates in uncertain streets in certain neighborhoods so that when you were driving on the street or walking on the street, the police could stop you. It essentially reorganized the neighborhood to allow the LAPD to better monitor and police that community.
Mm-hmm. All right, Elizabeth Hinton, the author of From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime, The Making of Mass Incarceration in America. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thanks so much, Michael. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. All right. That was Elizabeth Hinton, the author of From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime, The Making of Mass Incarceration in America. All right, listen up, folks. We got a lot of decisions to make, as I pointed out in the beginning of the show, and we got a lot standing before. The world is going to hell, all right? And you have a part in making sure that don't happen. All right, we've got some time left, and what we're going to do is take a musical break right now and be right back with a short piece by Bob Avakian, the chairman of the Revolutionary Communist Party.
I waited all my life to play, but I still can't find a way. But if I work it one more day, I might just break the chain. I might just break the chain. I might just break the freedom. We can use some of that, especially where we from, where we grew up like a green thumb, like a criminal, the only thing.
All right, welcome back. That was Lupe Fiasco with Break the Chain. And right now, I want to play you a piece from Bob Avakian. It's the trailer of a talk by Bob Avakian, chairman of the Revolutionary Communist Party, why we need an actual revolution and how we can really make revolution. So here's the trailer for the film, which you can access from revcom.us.
Why we need an actual revolution and how we can really make revolution. How many more times do the tears and the cries of anguish and anger have to pour forth from the wounded hearts of people? White supremacy, male supremacy, wars of empire, the demonization, criminalization, and deportations of immigrants, the destruction of the planet. Why is this the state of humanity? there's one fundamental reason. The basic nature of the system of capitalism, imperialism that we live under, and the way, because of its very nature, it continually perpetrates and perpetuates horror after horror. And in fundamental terms, we have two choices. Either live with all this and condemn future generations to the same or worse, if they have a future at all, or make revolution. An actual revolution does not mean trying to make some changes within the system. It means